So I have the distinct honor and privilege to introduce your Phi Alpha, Maurice Ducoing. Maurice actually introduced me last year at our Grand Chapter banquet in Seattle. And in coming up with my introduction, I had a choice between love or violence. I chose love, but violence was really close behind. So I'm going to make this very short, because I could speak for a long time about Maurice, but if I do that, I'll start crying. And no one wants to see that again. Mo is successful. First, when he was a consultant with Deloitte, as a practice director with K1, as a global VP with Latera, and now as a CEO of Ducoing Human Capital, Maurice has been an inspiration to many of us in terms of our career progression and a mentor to those of us that have had an interest in human capital throughout our careers. Maurice is a leader. As a volunteer, Maurice designed and led our membership education program as a volunteer for multiple years, not as a paid employee, but as someone who was willing to sacrifice day in, day out about ways to make our education for our brothers better and more effective. And in doing so, he stewarded friendships with many of the Zates that you still see in this room today. Those who have gone on to provide LTIs, to design courses, and to help mentor future staff members for Zeta Psi fraternity and the Educational Foundation. Maurice was a leader at the Psi chapter, both as an undergraduate and as an elder Phi, initially as a usurper to the elder Phi, and then within the international community. Maurice has been on our board of directors since the last time that we convened in New Orleans back in 2010. And just a personal side note, I remember sitting next to the pool with Maurice in 2010 at the Royal Sonesta when he had let me know that he was finally being asked to serve on the board of trustees. And I said to him at that point, it's long overdue. But then again, I had also just gotten back from Iraq 12 hours earlier, and I was already a little bit tipsy. Maurice is giving. So giving that last year he established a scholarship for those undergraduate and graduate students that are interested or engaged with the human capital practice, setting aside a fund within our educational foundation that is expected to grow in the future, but also provides support for students now. He is frequently traveling to different Zeta events as a representative for our organization on his own dime, using his own time, and ensuring that he meets as many Zates as possible to continue to steward the fraternity. But all those qualities are not necessarily unique to Maurice, because I could say that about a lot of different men in this room. But what I can only say about Maurice, and with the distinguished company here, what I feel like has separated him from his time in Zeta Psi is, I don't know, a more passionate Zate. And that's saying a lot when I look around the room at the men that are here. Maurice has always been passionate about our organization. He's brought it to everything that he does. That's why the guy is constantly ideating and thinking about new and better ways that we can improve our fraternity. And Maurice, I promise you, we'll do them all as soon as you raise $3.5 million on your own. In some ways, we stand in the shadow of the giants that are in this room here and those that came before us. But I feel confident in knowing that our fraternity is better for the service that Maurice has provided us as our Phi Alpha for the past 12 months, the inspiration that he's provided to many of our undergraduates that are here in this room, and the service to those who came before him as our most passionate Phi Alpha in Zeta Psi, Brother Maurice Ducoing from Cornell 2003. Maurice?
I'm simply going to extend much of what I said earlier today in our Grand Chapter Forum. I want to really just focus on a key specific area that I had a little bit of time to mention earlier, but I wanted to bring out a few specific notes and a little bit of a story. So, For those of you who know me and have known me this past year, as well as over the last several years, mental health is a very important aspect of what I think we do here at Zeta Psi. For a lot of it, it has been incidental. Coincidental simply because of the type of men and the caliber of men we have in our organization. That they help one another, they support one another, they are there for one another. We recently received a lot of data that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that those efforts matter. But I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about what appears to be a losing battle across many countries globally, and in particular in the United States, in the particular area of mental health. But I'll begin by setting context with my own story. In 1999, when I began my journey at Cornell, I had a lot of friends there. And then I chose not to pledge, primarily because I was a never joiner. I want to point that out for just one moment because I was a never joiner into the fraternity system. I almost went to Georgetown because at that time it did not have a system. That was where I was supposed to go. That was where my family wanted me to go. For some reason, some hand of God reason, I ended up going to Cornell. And at that point, it was not because of the Greek system that was there. Never joiner. Now, in the spring, everyone pledges fraternities and sororities. So we go from the fall, where everybody's there, there's so much fun to be had, to the winter in Ithaca. And if you've ever experienced that, and I know several of you have, it seems like a fate worse than death. And then mounting on top of that extreme loneliness, because there's no one to spend any time with. For me, I started actively looking into the Greek system because I realized back then it was an antidote to it. Now, I thought that was just because I have access to my friends, but what a simpler way of saying mental health than I have access to my friends. What a simple way of saying it. What a simple way of thinking about it. But we don't always make that connection. And so it's with that in mind that I began the journey with Zeta Psi. It's with attempting to have access to my friends and therefore just lead a healthier, less lonely life. A few facts for everyone, and I included these in my report to the board earlier this month. Loneliness amongst men. A 2023 study found 2/3 of men between the ages of 18 and 23 said that no one really knows me. 2/3. Research conducted in 2021 that found that 15% of men claim that they have no close friends, a staggering 12% increase since 1990. The same study also found that only 27% of men reported having 6 close friends, which is half the number of men who reported having that many friends 30 years earlier. In 2021, a PBS segment found that only 21% of men reported receiving emotional support from friends every week, compared to 41% of women, nearly double. And even that is less than half. Unmarried men are more likely to report loneliness, with 1 in 5 men reporting no close friends compared to the general population. Yet studies indicate that divorced men are 8 times more likely to experience depression or contemplate suicide compared to divorced women. Men often rely heavily on their partnership and children for companionships, making the loss of those connections particularly impactful. Just a few more. 44% of men surveyed in 2 studies had experienced suicidal ideation in the last 2 weeks. In emotional support calls, loneliness and isolation were mentioned in 28% of contacts from men who expressed suicidal thoughts. Men are almost 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women, and loneliness has been associated with suicidal ideation in many. I could keep going. Incidentally, If you go to Google and you look at the first page, you'll double the amount of reports and data that you'll find just on this subject. We cannot afford to allow the efforts that we make towards mental health of one another be coincidental. We can't. Those numbers are too terrifying. And we are not immune from them. Thankfully, many of the numbers that we see there are numbers that demonstrate that Zeta Psi, amongst other fraternities, are a solution to this problem. Just as a show of hands, how many of you would say you have more than 6 friends? Solution. I won't ask any of the other ones, but right there. Thank you, Alex. I bring this up because we all start someplace. And quite frankly, the journey, the passion that you bring to this, there's always going to be days when it's overwhelming. There's always going to be days when things don't go well for you. There's always going to be days where you need other people. And I truly hope that Zeta Psi will continue to be that place where you can find them. Even if there's a whole bunch of people who annoy you, Will, where are you? Yeah. That you find the people here that will always be there for you. I have been a Zate for nearly 24 years. 24 years. I started out with most of my friends being at the Psi chapter, and many of them still are, by the way. But then in 2003, I came to my first convention. I didn't know anyone outside of the Psi chapter at that point. Anyone at all. And just imagine that. 21 years later, I'm sitting here with a picture on this, I guess in a whole bunch of different things, but my picture here. I didn't think that was going to happen. I did not see that coming. Yes, thank you, Tom. I'll be here all week for the pictures. I didn't know anyone outside, and it only took one convention to turn that completely around. And then there just became 20 years of how much more can I give, how much more can I do? And believe me, there were dark patches in that time. Personally, professionally, no matter what we say about success, nobody wins all the time. And you need to insulate and protect yourself. And what are you doing? You're investing in yourself and you're investing in one another by investing in Zeta Psi. I believe that strongly. I'm going to do something that I don't normally do, and I'm going to start finishing up. And so I'll just make one final allusion, because then I'll start like Will, and I'll start crying as well, so I'm not going to do that. But last night we had an affinity group meeting. And the affinity group meeting was to introduce voices which are not often seen, not often spoken about in Zeta Psi. And it's only one of many, because there are many of those kinds of voices. And it's not to focus on the fact that we haven't in the past. It's to take the opportunity now into the future and to say there are many of those voices. In this particular case, it was LGBTQ, but it could be many different voices in the future. I stand here to say that we created a space for that. And Zeta Psi stood up for it. People came last night. I hope people will continue to come in the future, because that space, the spaces that we're going to create in the future, are ones that are going to help Zates fare better and lead happier lives. And that matters. And so with those ideas, with that concept in mind, as you spend the rest of these next couple of days together, Think about something that you don't normally appreciate. How lucky you are. Zeta Psi doesn't happen to everybody, but it happened to you. So appreciate that. Thank you.